Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Beyond the Alert. I'm excited today to speak with Robert Keefer, Associate Director of Security Operations at the Pew Charitable Trusts. Robert, thanks for chatting with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
All right, we're going to dive right in. You have lots of fantastic insights. So, you've protected a $6.7 billion nonprofit where cyber attacks are increasingly used as political tools. What's the one misconception about nonprofit cybersecurity that keeps you up at night?
I think the one thing that keeps me up at night more than anything else is the idea. I think a lot of people have the idea that a lot of these nonprofits have a specific goal and that they're forever working to reach that goal. And that's not actually true. Most of the mission-driven organizations that I've been a part of certainly have, in fact, a fairly broad scope. And Pew, in particular, is very responsive to the political needs of the time, which means that, like a lot of leaders, I'm spending my time kind of what they call looking around the corners, right? The difference being that for me, there are an awful lot of corners, more than I can really look around. So for me, the question is the thing is always, what am I missing? What political action is going to happen that we now need to respond to? And how is that going to change my risk posture? Right. And then the inevitable list of, okay, so how do I respond to that? How are people going to take that? And how do I promote that? And that's why I stay up all night. It's not even the initial question, it's all the follow-up.
Yeah, and trying to prepare for kind of the unknowns, right?
Yes.
How do you build a resilient security program when you have fewer people but exponentially more sensitive data than most enterprises?
The answer is one that you'll probably hear from me a lot for some of these questions, and that's building partnerships. I rely on individuals that are experts in their field to understand and implement the the security needs and requirements that I define. So rather than being proscriptive, I am prescriptive in most cases. That can actually be something of a adjustment period for new organizations that are used to a security person coming in and saying, you must do it this way, you have to do that, you can never do this. What I will do instead is, here are our goals. We need to be able to protect this data through this transaction in this fashion. How you do that is entirely up to you. You're the expert on fish, on whatever data you were collecting, whatever thing we're doing. So I need guidance from you on how we can best do that while you still do your job. And building that relationship, building that trust allows me to basically engage each one of these folks as a force multiplier. So that's a vital way to do this work.
And I think that's a really solid approach, right? Because you're giving enough context for someone to understand what it is that you're trying to get to.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. What I want to do is I want to empower good decisions.
What's your approach to getting executive buy in for security investments when you're competing with mission critical programs that directly serve communities?
Mostly I do that by becoming a enabler of those programs as much as possible, rather than attempting to describe to them all the things that could possibly go wrong. I try to focus on, here's how we can make this easier for you. These are the challenges you're going to encounter as you continue on this work from a data security standpoint. Here are the things that are potential blockers for you. Here's how I can help you get around those in certain ways. So, for instance, we've begun expanding fairly dramatically into the EU. And rather than saying, well, we have to be careful because GDPR, they know about GDPR, they know it exists. Here's how I can help you streamline your processes in such a way that we are not going to have to worry about GDPR. We're going to be compliant with those laws without significantly impacting our organization's ability to do their jobs. And that's typically how I do that. And then once they're sold on that, then I tell them, oh, and by the way, here's how much it's going to cost.
First, you get a sigh of relief when you say, "Here's how we can help," without cramping the business in day to day, and then you get probably another sigh of, "Okay, this is how much it'll cost us."
Yes. But by then I've proven the value. And that is really important. The biggest challenge to any sort of security work in a mission-driven org is that money that is spent on security is not being spent on the work of the organization. That doesn't mean they aren't going to spend it, but it means that they have to be able to justify it. And because that's not in their field, they can't make assumptions, right? Oh, of course we need to do this because I know PR like the back of my hand. None of these folks are security people, as you mentioned. So they don't necessarily immediately equate the value to the organization. So I have to draw those connections. And I find that if I draw those first and then present the bill, it's a little easier.
Yeah, because you're understanding the different drivers and levers, right, that impact security decisions, and you enable the rest of the teams to understand what goes into that and what factors into it.
Exactly right. And that means that when they're making decisions about to spend or not to spend or what our alternatives are, they're doing so from an informed position.
Hmm. Which makes it so much easier and also builds trust because it shows them you're trying to work with them and understand their kind of pain points and what they have to account for as well.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And allows me to build trust from me to them that they are making those decisions not arbitrarily or unfairly, but genuinely weighing the pros and cons of each.
Yeah. And so then if an incident occurs, you also have a much better kind of report already built out, right? So that when it's crunch time and you only have finite time to make decisions, you've established that trust already.
Exactly.
What about the board members who don't have that technical background? Is it the same approach or what do they need to understand kind of the political implications of an attack?
That one is a little tougher, in part because I don't always have the direct communication with the board that I might with senior leadership. So, in a lot of cases, I need to be explicitly and additionally clear to that senior leadership so that they can explain that to the board on my behalf, more or less. In a similar fashion that I try to make our researchers, our analysts, our PR folks, everybody kind of a security champion, I actually do the same thing upward and across as well. I want all of our senior leaders to also be security champions, but in this case, to the board rather than to the org as a whole necessarily.
Yeah, so incorporating more of the business side again, probably and the factors impacting the business as a whole, right?
Yes, exactly right. And I mean, to your point, it is very similar in that one of the things that I try to do is ensure that they understand that I want to take into account the needs of the organization as an organization, not merely as a repository of data that needs to be secured, right?
Yeah, for sure. So can you walk us through a moment when a strong partnership saved your organization from a significant security incident?
Without going into a great deal of
Yes,
detail,
but you can, and I understand.
we somewhat recently received a notification from one of our platform partners that they were seeing unusual activity in our tenant, and that they had connected that to a political organization that had been using 0 days, and they were seeing the same sort of indicators of compromise of IOCs in our tenant. So we took a look and found an account that was being suspicious that wasn't supposed to be there, shut it off, and there had been no malicious activity. A lot of that due to the fact that that partner alerted us as soon as they became aware, but also because we have built in a lot of the principles of zero trust. We aren't quite at zero trust yet, but we've started building a lot of those principles. And one of those is that you need to justify all of your activity. You need to be able to justify all of your access. And because this account no longer had justification for any access, it couldn't see anything. It was an account on its way out of the org anyway. So we were able to rectify that very, very quickly and essentially disarm a what could have been a fairly significant attack vector in a couple of emails.
Fantastic. I wonder how often that's a missed opportunity, right? Where you don't have those relationships with those partner organizations, or maybe you're not as a security organization considering all of those factors as well. I suppose it really depends on the industry and the level of the org, right? Whether it's national or global, adding complexity there.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons why I really recommend that anybody who's leading a SOC especially, but any security leader, be a part of their local ISAC, right? Their information security association. because the data sharing is extraordinarily valuable. There are a lot of companies that, in some cases rightly so, don't necessarily trust the information coming from their vendor because they're afraid that it's going to lead to an upsell, right? Or that it's just not real, but
Not surprisingly.
right. Or that it's an attempt to increase visibility on something minor in order to justify their existence, something like that, right? Now, to be fair, in my experience, that almost never actually happens, but all it takes is once. But an ISAC is usually your peers and is usually focused on your industry. So the data that you're getting is high fidelity and of high value. So that partnership, if there's any one group of people that you should develop a relationship with, it's that group, in my opinion.
It's fantastic input. Thank you. So, what creative strategies have you developed to attract and retain top security talent when you cannot compete on compensation with private sector, essentially?
Well, part of it is taking a fair amount of care with who you hire. We have recently begun being much more transparent on our salary ranges. We're putting them in the job descriptions now, whereas before we weren't letting people know until a little further into the process. So if you've made it even to the application stage, you're aware of what you're likely to make. And we don't want to attract people who are in this any of this work because they think that it's a good way to make the big bucks. There are certain organizations that you can work for as a security person, even a fairly low level security person and a fairly entry level security person, and make a lot of money. This is definitely not one of those. And we're always very upfront about that. The people that I hire are mission driven. We're a mission driven organization. We hire mission driven people. So these are people who want to see Pew succeed first and foremost. We do attempt to pay them as fairly as we can. We do have some trade-offs in terms of benefits that are kinda nice. I get a lot of time off, for instance.
Which in this job is so critical because of burnout, right?
Very critical. I just came back from vacation and I'd been dealing with a few things just before that, and I will tell you that if I hadn't taken that time off, this would be a very different interview.
We probably wouldn't be having an interview, but I really appreciate you jumping on after vacation when you have to dig yourself out of your inbox and everything else.
It'd be much more of an hour-long rant than an interview, to be fair. So, yeah, no, that's very important, and that's one of the things actually I emphasize for my people is that you will take the time off, and when you take the time off, you are gone. I will not reach you. I won't even reach you if there is an emergency, except to tell you, "Don't come in, the building's burned down."
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hasn't happened yet. So that's one. There's a few other things that we can, as an organization, offer individuals that are of benefit. But the other thing, and that's organizational. What do I do personally? I build a relationship of respect and trust with my team. I acknowledge them as experts in their field, just as I am, regardless of their level of experience, because they may not have as much of it as I do. But that's just a matter of age, right? It's easy to have more experience than everyone else on my team when I'm older than everyone else on my team.
Very few leaders are willing to say this, though.
Cheerleaders are willing to say this, and I think that's a problem.
Absolutely.
I think that there's a certain amount of vulnerability that I think you need to cultivate as a leader, and I understand how tough that is. I'm very you may not realize it here, but I am very, very introverted. This is the most animated I'm going to be all day, and I'm gonna be wiped for the rest of the afternoon. So I understand that developing that vulnerability and sharing that with your team is challenging, but I think it's very, very important. I give my team tasks and projects that are interesting for them, that are in line with the things that they want to do as much as possible, and I trust them to do that work. I don't hover.
No, you don't micromanage?
I don't micromanage. I try not to macromanage any more than absolutely necessary. I'm a big fan of providing inspiration, of providing direction. And then, just like I do with the folks that aren't on my team, where I say, here's where we need to be, and I trust you to know how to get there. I do the same thing with my team. Here's where we need to be with this platform, with this tool, with this approach. I want you to figure out how to get there.
Yes, you give them autonomy.
Right. Because I want them to learn how to do this if they don't know how. If they do know how, I want them to show that off. And I find that that helps a great deal. But ultimately, some people outgrow this organization. And when they do, I wish them the best of luck.
And I'm sure you stay in touch with them because you've built such great rapport.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell them, look, if you need a you need a reference, I'm right here. Absolutely not a problem. and I'll tell your future boss, I'd hire them back in a heartbeat if I thought we could provide value to them. But sometimes we can't, right? Sometimes somebody will catch fire with the idea of doing some aspect of security that we just don't need. I don't need a full-time pen tester. I don't have enough stuff to pen test. If that's really what you want to do, I will help you learn how to do that to the best of your ability, because while you're doing that, you are engaged, you are happy, you are energetic, you are learning new stuff that we can take advantage of here at Pew. But then when you're done and you find that pen test job, that red team job over here, I'm going to wish you well.
And when you need that 1 or 2 time year pen test, you can go call them and say, "Hey, can you do it?" And you trust them. You don't have to go through all that vendor language and see what's smoke and mirrors versus reality, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And this is such a key point. I'm finding throughout these podcasts and these interviews, and these are my favorite sessions of the week, that it's really down to the leadership style as to how you can motivate people. The Some people call it servant leadership, right? You enable and get out of people's way. I've been smiling throughout this whole question. You've seen it because there is just no way that monetary funds can replace everything you've just talked about, right? Money is nice. We all have a mortgage to pay. Political situation, everything else, we'll leave it at things are getting more and more expensive. But at the end of the day, what's happening in corporate America is that people are being worked to death. When you have a vacation, you have to work 3 times as much up front, 3 times as much after. I'm sure you're doing it, right? Because you're enabling your team, making sure they're set up for the week that you're gone. But at the end of the day, that's not vacation, and people are being worked to death and they have no work-life balance. So, I mean, you alone saying you have their back, you enable them, you make sure they have that career momentum and time off. No other company gives someone in the SOC time off to that extent, right? And if so, then it's say, "Hey, I'm gonna call you and wake you up at 2 AM because we just had an emergency."
Right. In which case you're not actually off. You're hovering around the phone all day, as you say.
Yeah, and so to me, this is really we talk about AI and AI can enable, streamline all of that, right? But at the end of the day, the EQ is so key to having that great team, and there's nothing that will ever replace that.
And to my mind, I think if you talk about what's the value of AI to IT in general, frankly to business in general, I think that's one of the big ones is that AI can automate some of that tedious back work that gives you space to develop and express your EQ. I think that's really where the value is. Like I used AI when I came back to help comb through the 8 million emails that I had. So I knew which ones I needed to respond to right away. And then I developed that response and I emailed it out, which meant that as soon as I was back, I could reach out to my team and say, "Hey, what happened while I was gone? Is there anything you need me to deal with right off the bat?" Right? And the answer was no, because they know that whatever solution they come up with, I'm going to sign off on.
And this is how you were able to show up for the podcast today.
And that's how I was able to show up with the podcast today.
On the note of introverts, what's really interesting is that research says introverts are so much better in these types of scenarios and social settings. Do you know why? Because it's not their nature, so they prepare well. And the extroverts are supposed to have like jazz hands, I got this covered, and then don't actually follow up with people and drop the ball. On that note, what is the biggest challenge in building security culture across an organization where most people are focused on social impact rather than cyber threats?
The biggest challenge is interesting in its nature because it's oppositional in some ways. I encounter a lot of people that are simultaneously eager to move forward with the next big thing and resistant to change, sometimes in the exact same sentence. So I will have a conversation with somebody who really wants to move forward with this next AI tool and when can we get that deployed? Oh, and by the way, can I get an exception to the MFA because I really don't like having to have my phone on my desk all the time? Huh?
So, how do you sort that out?
So if I'm in a hospital, it's a lot easier because I can point at HIPAA, I can point at state laws, I can point at a few things. Look, we have to do this. That's I know, I understand it sucks. You have to have your phone out all the time. You don't have a choice. I'm sorry. I'm not the bad guy here. Unfortunately, a lot of other places like Pew, I am the bad guy. This is largely my idea. What I focus on is how it makes things easier. So if you engage in this new security process that you are uncomfortable with because it's new, what steps am I taking away in exchange to make your life easier? Yes, you now have to have your phone out and you have to tap on it once to get in. But you remember those 18 website apps that you used to have to log into every single time? We're using an MFA empowered SSO portal now, so you don't need to log into any of those. You just click the button and you're golden. Isn't that much easier? Oh, well, yeah. There you go. Biggest advantage that I have is, again, back to the fact that being a mission driven org, we hire mission driven people. They really want to do the right thing. They're just not always convinced that what I'm asking them to do is the right thing, or they're confused about which of the many right things they've been presented with they should do at any one moment. So I'm starting from a position of encouragement, of good faith. People genuinely want to do the right thing, even if it's going to impact their work, as long as it's not too much. And that's extraordinarily helpful. But I do end up having to have a lot more conversations about the whys and the wherefores and the trade-offs, pro and con, than I might in a for-profit business, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. One of the things that I find is that folks take these lessons home with them. I've had a couple of people tell me how they've set up MFA for all of their banks at home now because they like it so well at work, for instance, which is a pretty good feeling, right? Because now you're secure everywhere.
And they've bought into what you've said, and they see the value that you've been doing that on the home front, right? So it's such an easier conversation going forward.
Exactly right.
Great. So, how has the shift towards viewing cyber attacks as geopolitical tools changed your threat modeling and incident response planning?
Probably the biggest thing is a different understanding of what attacks are going to look like. When I joined Pew 5 years ago, the largest number of attacks were incidental, were drive-by. They were criminal groups. They were the same people that are attacking anybody else. And they're finding an open IP address, they're throwing stuff at it, they're seeing what sticks, they're sending in emails with the virus on it. But if it doesn't work, they move on. Like, okay, well, my tool didn't work. I've spent $50,000 to rent this from somebody. I've got bigger fish to fry. I'm going to go see if I can hack Nintendo. Right? That's the model we all know. You lock your door, and then the thief goes next door, and hopefully they'll try that lock.
Yeah, lowest hanging fruit.
Lowest hanging fruit, exactly. So all I need to do is bring the fruit up out of the way, and we're gold. That's not the case here. When you're being attacked by a geopolitical agent, right? And advanced persistent threat, APT. Oh boy, oh boy. We all love that one. The persistent part is really important to take note of because it means that they don't give up. They throw a phishing email campaign at you, and that doesn't work. So maybe they tweak it a little bit, and that didn't work. So now they scrape your website and they put up a fake site that looks just like yours, and they tell your people, hey, you need to log in here. And they click on the link. And that doesn't work because we don't use passwords anymore. So now they try a virus or. The point being that the same group keeps trying new things, including breaking out the 0 days until they succeed.
So, if you catch anything, any attempt anywhere, you know they're not going away.
Right. Once you see one, it's kind of like termites. Once you see one, you're done. You've got them. They're there and they're going to stay until you fumigate or burn the house down. So, what does that mean on a practical level? What that means is you need to have your team, you have to balance the degree of which your team spends on alert versus resting, because anybody can tell you, if you're constantly on alert all the time, you're always at high, you can't sustain that, right? That's unsustainable. And this is another area where AI is helpful because we rely on automation and on analysis and on automated response, a significant deal in a post APT world. Because if they're going to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, then I want the machines to keep responding and keep blocking and keep blocking and keep blocking. And they do. We have an outsourced SOC that does all of our level one triage. And that's important because they can hire hundreds of people and they can cycle them in and cycle them out. So they're rested, so they're alert at all times. And they can read through all of the low level stuff that may or may not be a problem or may just be somebody logging in from Bangladesh at 3:30 in the morning because they were just at a conference and they really need to check their email real quick. Or maybe we're being hacked by, you know, a geopolitical threat actor. Hard to say. They do all that initial analysis so that my team can concentrate on the credible threats. So I offload a lot of that. But I also have multiple layers of defense and multiple layers of response, right? So it's not just antivirus. It's not just HIPs. It's not just better rights management. It's not just automated response. It's and, right? It's the antivirus and the HIPs and the automated response and the ability to isolate machines and the ability to isolate users and the ability to isolate data and, which means that I've kind of turned the old adage on its head, where we used to say the defender needs to be correct every time, the attacker needs to be correct once. The attacker now needs to be correct a lot of times before they can get to anything useful and do any real damage. And every single time they bypass that, they have to try and do so silently because otherwise, as soon as they bypass one, the alarm is tripped and my team is on it. So, from a very practical standpoint, that's really what that means. For me, what that means is making sure that my leadership understands that we are going to be breached. Not today, maybe not next week, but, in the words of Casablanca, soon.
I wonder how many people are transparent about that and honest, right? In the security front of, hey, and you know this best because of the communities you're in, right? Like the local chapters and things like that. But do you find that common that someone will tell the leadership team, this will happen, right? It's just a matter of de-risking as much as possible?
I think it happens, but I think there's a difficulty in expressing that in a way that doesn't seem like FUD, right? Like fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the old Microsoft years. Now I'm dating myself a little bit.
No, as a marketer, I hate the FUD stuff, so I try to stay away from that as much as possible.
Great. Thank you for that, because there are certainly people who don't. It's not enough to just go to the board and say, one day we're going to get hacked. Because they're going to go, oh, sure, okay, whatever.
Lost cause, so why bother? But you use it more in the sense of this is why we need all of those layers, right? Like peeling an onion.
Right. We are going to be attacked. Those attacks are going to be successful. Here's what we're doing to make it so that they have to be successful over and over again. But we do need to prepare for the eventuality that all of those do get through at some point. Here's my recommendation. Here's what we should do. Here's how we should be ready for that. Here are the steps I need you to take, because there's a lot of things that I can't do once a breach occurs. I am not a lawyer. I cannot do litigation. You do not want me writing the press release. You really don't want me writing the press release.
And you don't want to have to do that stuff either.
I don't want to have to do that stuff. Oh, God. No, thank you. Absolutely not. Right? The CEO has decisions that they need to make. Each member of the board has decisions that they need to make that only they can make. And I can provide some guidance in terms of here's what happened from a security standpoint. Here's the things that are going to occur. But from an organizational standpoint, what does this mean for this project that we're reporting to the German government? I have no clue, man. No clue. I can tell you that this is the data that was accessed, and here's what we think they did with it. That's it. From there, you've got to make that decision. So we prepare for that as much as we can. We're actually in the process of kind of reevaluating some of that in light of this, because this is actually a fairly new realization for us. This is not as common as people are afraid it is, and it's a lot newer than I think a lot of people realize in the degree that which it is happening now.
Yeah, in that sense, you're prime target, right? So you have a lot more risk than other industries.
But that's actually fairly new. It used to be that if you weren't one of the three-letter acronym folk, that you could be reasonably certain you weren't going to get attacked by our national adversaries. That's no longer the case. We're seeing, organizations like the Red Cross, they used to be able to say things like, we're the Red Cross. Why would anybody attack us? The answer apparently is because they can, and because they want you to go away, because they need chaos. They need people desperate. They need people angry. Why would anyone attack Pew? Because they don't want truth. I mean, that's what we do. We gather and disseminate truth, fact. We don't interpret it. We don't spin it. We gather it. We disseminate it. We share it as widely as possible. There are certain factions out there who really don't like that idea and they want us gone. And they have discovered that they can do that by breaking into our systems and destroying them. And that's new for folks. Because a lot of times when you say things about breaches, about attacks, they'll say things like, but what do we have that they want to steal?
Very different mindset and strategy or kind of modus operandum where that comes from, right?
Right, right. Back in the day, that was what people wanted. They wanted to steal things. Now they want to break things. It's a different sort of resilience.
Which is fascinating because it should be such an obvious thing, right? If you pay any attention to what's going on. But then it's almost this seems like such an outlier and unbelievable that we don't want to believe it until we have an example, right?
My theory is that because a lot of the platforms for malware as a service, were designed around a profit motive, right? The mob was developing it, basically. Criminal gangs were developing it in order to make money. And the best way for people to make money renting this is to steal things and then sell them, right? Or blackmail people or what have you. It didn't occur to anybody that, hey, I could spend $1 million, which isn't a lot of money, but then I have this platform that I can use to destroy my enemies. Oh, hey, I think that's only really just occurring to some of these folks. And that's why we're starting to see it now more than we were.
So this is really timely and fantastic for any other nonprofits who will be listening to this episode because they could say, here we go. Now I have some additional validation and proof to go bring to my leadership team and say, hey, listen to Robert.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Listen to Robert.
So what's the most valuable lesson you've learned from leading security teams you wish someone had told you 10, 15 years ago?
Security leadership is a people role. It is not a computer role. I have entire days where I don't turn my computer on and I am more effective rather than less. That's probably the one thing that not only did I not know, but I don't really see a lot of people teaching. It's certainly not in the CISSP exam.
I'm sure. Goes back to that EQ, right?
Right.
So what would you tell in that vein? What would you tell someone studying, master's computer science, what have you, to try to get into those entry-level cybersecurity jobs and they're computer focused? They probably would say, wait a minute, what do you mean?
The technical skills at the analyst level, at the engineer level, at the implementer level, absolutely vital. And keeping up on those skills and not just developing the skills, but developing the skills to develop the skills, right? If that makes sense. The practice of development is absolutely important. But if you are interested in influencing an organization, you need to turn those development skills towards developing EQ, towards becoming a leader, because the computers don't make the decisions, even in a world of generative AI. Someone has decided to trust the computer to make that decision. That's a decision a human made. You are going to be influencing people. You are going to be protecting people. I think that's the one thing that makes me a little different from a lot of security leaders is that I don't see it as protecting data. I don't see it as protecting the organization. I see it as protecting people. I joke around a lot that I got into cybersecurity because I'm out of shape to become a cop. I like the idea of protecting folks. And this is the way that I have chosen to do that.
Yeah. And in a big way in this case, right? Protecting the truth.
It's what's drawn me to mission driven orgs in general in the first place, is because those people, those groups, their primary goal is to protect people, to make life better.
It's a bigger purpose rather than just a paycheck, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I like my widgets as much as the next person, but
We all do. So, if you could give one piece of actionable advice to CISO who's just accepted their first role in a mission driven organization, what would fundamentally change their approach to building their own security program?
listen, listen a lot. The organization has specific needs, specific biases, and in most cases, a long and storied tradition of doing things a certain way. You need to listen to each and every one of those and understand them first, because only then can you start asking, why are we doing it that way? And you need to do that from a position of curiosity, not accusation, not why are we doing it that way, but why are we doing it that way? What's the value there? What's the history there? because then you can start suggesting improvements, changes where necessary, and keeping the ones that aren't. One of the very first things that I did when I joined Pew was I got rid of our password change requirement. I did that because everyone was remote, because changing passwords every 6 months required a call to the help desk, which meant they were down for half a day just to change a password, and because we were on MFA. So I showed our leadership the NIST guidance. I said, we need to make the passwords a little bit longer, a little more complex, and then not change them unless they're breached. And that shocked people. That shocked people for a number of reasons. First of all, it felt like it was somehow less secure, but also because I wasn't just arbitrarily making changes. I was listening to what was going on. I was trying to understand what the problems were, what the challenges were, what the concerns were, and answering those. So I was immediately building that relationship, building those partnerships.
Yeah, because you're solving a pain point, you're finding a new solution, and then the ROI savings of just human salaries, right? Those changes and downtime.
But you can only do that if you are humble enough to sit and listen to what's going on with an open mind and an open heart, with an understanding that you don't necessarily know better than they do because you don't have their background.
Which I feel as though, the real leaders understand that kind of natively, right? But then if you have a leader who's there for the sake of being a leader, they won't take people who don't have the same title seriously necessarily. And so it's the mindset. And it's almost like how kids have a sixth sense, right? Your people know if you have their back or not, and if you trust them and you want to believe what they have to say and care.
Yeah, and you set that the first day, and it's really hard to change if we do it poorly.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Question from the last person, Eda Ribeiro, who is the director of Global IR at TransUnion. Besides AI, what do you think is the biggest change to cybersecurity in the next 5 years?
I think the biggest change to cybersecurity in the next 5 years is going to be the degree to which it becomes democratized. We're already beginning to see larger organizations kind of split up the CISO role in a lot of ways. So they've got their business security officer, their AI security officer, their data security officer, their whatever. Some of that is geographical, so they've got their regional leadership, but in a lot of cases, it's being split up by function because security is becoming too large for any one person to really be accountable for at any level of detail. And the CISO is becoming more and more as we try very hard to get a seat at the board, we're becoming a board member, which means that while we are influencers, while we understand at a broad stroke all of the concepts, we no longer have the capacity as individuals to have an in-depth knowledge of all of those different things, right? And it's not that we're getting stupider, it's that the process it's that the system's getting broader. It's just too much for any one person to do. So we're pushing that down, and then we're pushing the other functions down as well, and then the other functions down as well, and so on and so on and so on. You've been seeing this for years now in the development world where we've been moving unit tests and security unit tests down to the development level. We're starting to see that at the organizational level as well. More and more, the people who do the actual day to day work are becoming empowered to make security decisions. Microsoft has a fairly comprehensive DLP program now throughout the multiple platforms. And the whole goal of it is to enable that citizen development that is part of their Power Platform. And I don't want to make this a Microsoft advertisement or anything. I know this because it's what we've been working with lately. And I'm no longer the person making the decision, is this data safe to share? The computer is, and the person developing the application is saying, is this data I want to share? And who do I want to share it with? And we're having to rely on their knowledge, their best practices, and the framework that we've established to determine whether or not that's okay. So I think that's probably the biggest thing is that and I think that aligns really well with what I was saying before about the security leader becoming more and more a person leadership and less about the computer. That's because we're no longer flipping those switches. We're just telling people, here's where that needs to end up. And you need to make the good decisions about it.
Marketing could certainly benefit from the same approach as well, I have to say. Though we don't have risk in that sense, right? But you knocked it out of the park. You answered the question, and you've brought us full circle to the beginning of your conversation. So now the floor is yours. What kind of a curveball would you like to throw for the next guest?
I have recently become very interested in not just team development, but legacy development. So I think what I would be really interested in hearing from your next guest is, what are you doing to identify and train the person who's going to take the role after you?
Good one. This has been such a pleasure. You've pulled on such fascinating threads and have a really unique angle, especially with your experience and your leadership style. So, if people would like to connect with you, where can they do that?
Thank you so much. The best place to do that is absolutely going to be via LinkedIn. My email is there. My phone is there. I almost never answer my phone though. So
Good call.
best thing to do is ping me on LinkedIn. Say, hey, I saw you on the podcast. I'm an instant fan. Can I have your autograph?
Here we go. And then we got to figure out how to do that digitally, but I'm sure you have that figured out too.
I'll figure something out. I'll use DocuSign or something. I don't know.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. And thanks to all of our guests.